Sean Swarmer experienced cancer twice as a teenager, and at one point had 14 days to live. Since then, he has inspired people around the globe with his story. He realizes that after coming frighteningly close to death, there would be no challenge too great, no peak too high. Sean has broken through defined human limitations in order to redefine the way the world views success. He was the first cancer survivor to climb Mount Everest. He has since topped the highest peaks on each continent, thus completing the 7 summits. And then, as if he hadn't done enough, he skied to both the North and South Poles, which is called, I didn't know this either, the Explorer's Grand Slam. Then he went on to do the Ironman World Championship in Hawaii. Sean is the only person in history to accomplish all of those feats. He continues to defy the odds, test his own endurance, and inspire and motivate people around the world. He shares his message of healing, hope, and triumph with cancer patients worldwide. He also serves as a source of inspiration as the founder of a nonprofit organization called Keep Climbing. He has been the author of a book, Cancer Climber Association is the organization. He's the author of the book called Keep Climbing. He is a motivational speaker to corporations, universities, and organizations like us. It is my sincere privilege and honor to introduce to you Sean Swarmer. Let's give him a warm Fort Worth welcome.
Before we begin, I'm going to put my phone down, I don't need that anymore. I'm going to find this guy and take you through a quick intro video. And if anyone's interested, this is, it's a trailer for a movie that Amazon just posted about me. You heard about the expedition to the North Pole, and this is a trailer about that film. I hope you enjoy.
There's 5 of us on this expedition. There was originally 6, and unfortunately one person's had to be evacuated. This is my 13th North Pole trip I've led. It's a relentless place, the frozen ocean, absolutely relentless. Takes no prisoners, indiscriminate. You could be the wealthiest person in the world, the poorest person in the world. The size of your house, how fast your car goes, how many credit cards you've got, it's all irrelevant. And the cold will absolutely steel your bones. If you can work as a team, if your spirit is really strong, that's what will get you through. It is peaceful up here, so I think it's good for the soul. You get a chance to reflect. So everything gets magnified and exposed. Your character gets exposed. The team's characters gets exposed. So you get down to the raw person, and then you can work with that, whether it be good or whether it be bad. Sean's journey, and anybody who suffered with cancer, you know, it's indiscriminate. There were no reasons, no rhyme or reason. It can just take anybody. So if you do compare Sean and what he survived and what he's battled through, you know, he's probably used a lot the word survivor, but Sean is a survivor. But up here, for me, Sean's an explorer. Sean's an adventurer. For Sean, it's a huge emotional push now to finish what has been a life's journey since surviving cancer. We all like to think we're survivors and we're tough guys and we can get on with things, and whatever life throws at us, these just words. But Sean has actually done all that. To be a small part of his Grand Slam as well, and the end of it is quite special. He's incredibly humbling. He is an inspiration, and I think we can all draw from that. We are possibly a day away now from conquering the North Pole. and for Sean, the Explorers Grand Slam.
So as you can see, oh, thank you very much. It's a very emotional film, and if anybody is interested in watching it, it is on Amazon Prime. You just look up Sean Swarner, True North. But the funny thing about the North Pole is a lot of people don't understand how cold it gets. I had no idea it was cold at the North Pole. It's very warm here. And I gave a presentation in Las Vegas about a week after I came back from the North Pole, and there was a 200-degree temperature difference. Up at the North Pole, it was about 80 below zero, with 90 to 95% humidity. Because the whole time you're on a glacier that's floating on the ocean, and the humidity comes up. And the whole time we're also on this trip, every night we radio back to the Russians. And the Russians are the ones who are pretty much in charge of everything ice and vodka for some reason. But they run a temporary camp up there, and they're in charge of all the expeditions. And we would radio back to them every day, every evening, just to see what's going on, because they would have a helicopter, and they would kind of patrol the area. And one night we called back, and they said, well, you guys have 2 polar bears coming after you. And this was the first expedition I've ever been on where I actually had to bring a firearm. So we had a rifle. And in my tent mate, you saw the guy there with the awesome frozen mustache. I'm not even going to tell you what made that freeze there, but we're laying in the tent, and we're practicing with this rifle. Flipping off the safety and bringing it up. And he practices, I'm practicing, I give it over to him, and all of a sudden I just start laughing hysterically. He's like, what the hell's wrong with you? There's a polar bear out there. In fact, there are 2 of them. It's like, yeah, but we're sitting here practicing like the thing's going to come up, unzip the front of the tent, and say, hey, guys, you got room for me? And he's just going to rip into it. And then also we were wondering, how is this thing, how does it know where we are? I mean, the Arctic is so vast, right? Hundreds of thousands of miles. On about day 4 or 5, we realized that as we're moving forward, and we're pulling the sledges behind us, and we went back, and when we had to rest, and we'd sit on those sleds, unzip the front of it, dig inside, and pull out our little plastic bag of food. Before we left for the expedition, we actually weighed out our food, day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4 lunches. Breakfasts were in camp, and dinners were in camp. So lunches, we would, like I said, sit on the sled, unzip the front, pull out the plastic bag, and eat it. And if you're pulling a 200-pound sled, every ounce makes a difference, right? And if you're sitting there thinking to yourself, I think we have about an hour to go. I don't need that food. Dump it out, zip it up, and trek on. All of a sudden, one day, we all realized that we were all doing that. So the polar bears, hello, they're just walking by. Oh, hey, following its nose. We're leaving a proverbial breadcrumb for this thing to come after us. But I thank you guys for being here. What Rutledge is doing is fantastic, and I'm honored to be a part of it. My story, and I say my story is because that's why I'm here. I want to share with you what I've been through, and we all have stories to tell. We all see life from different perspectives. We all have 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. I believe you can learn something from every single person on the planet. No matter how old, no matter how young. Everybody sees it a little bit differently. I was a normal kid growing up in Willard, Ohio. Anybody ever heard of Willard? Are you serious? There's always one. Cleveland, all right. Well, the reason I'm so impressed is because it was a town of about 5,000. I think it's gone down since then. And it was a farming community. My backyard was a bean field or a cornfield, depending on the season. And I think we had 1 or 2 stop signs and maybe a stoplight. And I was a normal kid growing up in Midwest Ohio, Midwest values, Midwest everything. And I was just playing a game of basketball one day, came down, something snapped in my knee. That knee injury triggered every joint in my body to go so haywire, I swelled up like the Pillsbury Doughboy. You know, in this small town, they started treating me for pneumonia. They didn't have the testing to determine that I had cancer. So initially they started, like I said, treating me for pneumonia, and it's very difficult to cure cancer by sucking on a nebulizer. Go figure, that didn't work so well. So I'm laying in the hospital bed, and I remember the doctor came in and asked Mom and Dad to come outside, and his name was Dr. Rosso, Dr. John Rosso. Asked Mom and Dad to step outside, and he asked them, hey, do you guys know of any oncologists? You know, that was the first time I'd ever heard of that word, the big O word, oncologist. I had no idea what it was, so they took me to Columbus, Ohio. Started testing me, they did a ton of bone marrow tests, CAT scans. I can't tell you how many purple vials they took. And eventually they diagnosed me with advanced stage 4 Hodgkin's lymphoma, and as a 13-year-old, they told my parents, your firstborn son, has 3 months to live. See if that works. Is it getting worse? We had some technical issues, but we'll get through it, it's no problem. I remember one morning, and I'm sure other people have recognized this as well. We can go back a couple. There we go. Some other people have been in the same situation, but I remember sitting in my bed in the morning, 3 or 4 months into the chemo. And as I'm sitting on the edge of my bed, I remember looking over because something caught my eye. And where my pillow was, you know, just the night before, where I laid down, where my head was resting, it was covered in hair. So I remember thinking I knew it was going to happen. I know it's going to eventually fall out. So I ran to the bathroom. You know, I looked in the mirror and I started fixing my hair and trying to think of myself, maybe I can fix it. Maybe I can comb it over. Maybe I can stop it from falling out. Maybe I can do something. You know, because as you heard on the video before, when you're in high school, when you're in 8th grade, 13 years old, you have different perspectives and different things matter to different people. I was worried about losing my hair, so I went into the shower, turned the water on, and I remember the water not hitting my hair and kind of seeping down to my scalp. It was just hitting my scalp directly. And I also remember every time I took my hands off of my head, they were covered in hair. I collapsed to the shower floor, the bottom of the shower floor, and I just put my head in my hands, and I started losing it. I bawled my eyeballs out. It was also in that same moment that I decided that I had 2 choices with what was happening in my life. I could either fight for my life or give up and die. The second one's not an option. I started looking at life as a 13-year-old. It forced me to change. I can't say I'm more mature now because I'm definitely not. But in the moment at 13, I remember thinking of what Jerry Snee, my neighbor 2 houses down, was doing, getting ready for school that morning. He was looking in the mirror, combing his hair, making sure it was perfect, right? Every little strand in place. Making sure his I think it was the Reebok pump at that time, had just enough air in his shoes. You know, his clothes were pressed. He looked great. I'm 60 pounds overweight, bald from head to toe, crying my eyeballs out, pulling chunks of hair out of the drain so the water can go down. I went through about a year of chemotherapy, gained 60, 70 pounds, lost everything, lost my friends, you name it was gone. But thanks to the miracle of modern medicine, family support, prayer, and just an inner will to get up out of the hospital, I walked out of the hospital a hairless, happy, bloated young man. I wish I could say that was the end of the story, but unfortunately it's not. I was going in for a checkup for the first cancer, see if that works, when they found a second cancer. I guess I'm a bit of an overachiever. In one day, I remember going to the hospital. They found a tumor on an x-ray, about the size of a golf ball. They did a needle biopsy. They took out a lymph node. They put in a Hickman catheter. They cracked up my ribs, took out the tumor, put in a drainage tube, and started chemotherapy in less than 1 day. And this time around, I was diagnosed with a type of cancer that affects 3 out of 1 million people with a prognosis of 6%. So if you have 100 people with this illness, 94 die. The chances of me surviving both Hodgkin's and Askins sarcoma is equivalent to winning the lottery 4 times in a row with the same numbers. I mean, you're looking at a living, breathing, walking miracle. I truly believe that. And yes, I have played the lottery, and I'll give you one guess how many numbers I get. I went through 3 months of intense chemotherapy, 1 month of intense radiation therapy, and then 10 more months of chemotherapy. In fact, this time around, I was diagnosed with the type of cancer that they told me that I only had. See if it works. No? Okay, try it again. Is it going now? No. How about if there we go. They told my parents, your firstborn son has 14 days to live. So now I have an expiration date. I mean, everybody has an expiration date, and if you want to try something that'll blow your mind, get a piece of paper, draw a horizontal line, one line over here, one line over here. Over here, put the 4-digit year that you were born, add about 80 years to it, 85 years, put that number right there. That's your lifeline. There's a book, and I've never mentioned this in a presentation, there's a book called The Dash. Anyone ever read The Dash? Write it down, read it. It's a poem on that line being your dash through life, because everybody's always in a hurry, right? People are always in a hurry to get to the weekend. You know, people are always in a hurry to get to the holidays. People are always in a hurry to be happy. See where I'm going with that? When you go through 2 cancers, it really changes your perspective on life. So like I said, 3 months of chemo, 1 month of intense radiation, 10 more months of chemotherapy, and every time I was in the hospital, I was in a medically induced coma. I don't remember being 16 years old, except for that 1 month of radiation where they killed so much of my right lung. I only have one fully functioning lung. So every time you guys have to breathe, I breathe twice to make up for that. Or I just have one big bulldog lung over here. It's amazing how the body adapts. Going through these 2 cancers really taught me a lot about life. How many people here wake up in the morning and they think of all the things they have to do, they need to do, they should do? We have no honest people in this room. Thank you. You wake up and you think, I should do this, I should do that, I should do this, I should do that, right? Stop shooting on yourself, first of all, okay? Because you're starting your day off on a negative note. I have to do this, I need to do this, I should do this. You're laying in bed and you're already planning your future. You're already planning your day thinking, oh man, I need to do this. What if you started while you were laying in bed and you pictured yourself successful, already accomplishing all of those things? How would it feel if you woke up in the morning as you were laying in bed, the first 5-10 minutes you're laying there, and you thought to yourself, those are already done. How would it feel if you wanted to do things? How would it feel if you woke up in the morning and thought to yourself, I want to do those, not I have to do those? And also while you're laying in bed, anybody here have affirmations they tell themselves in the morning? A couple people? I encourage you to do this, and I also encourage you at the end of the day, get a journal, write down 5 things you're grateful for, and journal about one of them, being grateful. Not just what it was, but how it made you feel. Get in touch with your feelings, because we're human beings, not human doings. You know, and there's science that has shown that you reprogram your synapses and your brain will start focusing on the positives as opposed to the negatives. We're inundated with negativity from the news, from TV, from everywhere anyhow. And if you don't program your brain will be programmed for you. Journal at the end of the day. Wake up in the morning and do what I do. You can steal it if you want to. I tell myself, no matter what, you know, the past is gone. There's nothing I can do about it. Tomorrow may never come. No matter what happens today, today is the best day ever. And I firmly believe that. I'm still looking at the flowers from up here, not at the roots, right? I'm going to live every day to my fullest and make every day the best day ever. So let's see if we can, is that working? How about if I just point, or just point over there? That'll work. So I remember going in graduating high school, going to college, starting off molecular biology. I thought I was going to cure cancer by splicing genes until I took organic chemistry and immunology. Switched to psychology, decided I wanted to be a psychologist for cancer patients. I figured with my background, you know, it's not just an individual disease. As we all know, everybody goes through it too. So I thought, all right, well, with my background, I could probably help a lot of people touched by cancer. But one thing I never did was look at what I've gone through myself. I never stopped to look myself in the mirror and ask, who are you? What do you want? You know, and how the cancer changed my life. But I did know that life is too precious and too short. And I know that the human body can live for roughly 30 days without food. The human condition can sustain itself for about 3 days without water. But no human alive can live for more than 30 seconds without hope. Because without hope, what do we have left? So I did some research with my brother and found that no cancer survivor had ever climbed to the top of Mount Everest, and I wanted to be the first. I wanted to use it as a 29,000-foot platform to scream hope, to give back to the cancer community and let people know that it's not a death sentence, and it can potentially be something amazing. So I was living in Jacksonville, Florida. Hey, look at that. Awesome. Teamwork. So I moved from Jacksonville, Florida to Estes Park, Colorado. Anybody ever been to Estes Park? Yeah, beautiful, isn't it? So there's a mountain out there called Long's Peak. It's 14,256 feet in Rocky Mountain National Park, and it's 18 miles round trip. I did that once a week with 100 pounds of rocks in my backpack, just to train, because I knew that if I was going to climb Everest, I had to do something every single day to get up there. I had to be in the best shape of my life, and I was going with a disability of one lung. It's hard enough for people with 2 lungs to get up there. When I first moved out to Colorado, I didn't even have a place to stay. My office was the library. My phone was a payphone bank. I lived out of the back of my Honda Civic for a couple months and tented and camped for a couple months. The first snow came, and I found a place to live. But I started approaching Everest organizers, and they told me that there's no way anyone, a guide, a company was going to take up a 1-lung, 2-time cancer-surviving lunatic. I actually had someone say that. They said there was no way that they were going to take that chance because it was physiologically impossible to do it. So I got in touch with the guy who organized National Geographic's expeditions, and I figured if he can organize National Geographic, he can organize me. And they're a little bit bigger. So the time finally came. I didn't have enough money. I begged, I borrowed, I pleaded, I robbed a few banks. I'm kidding. I did what I had to do to make the dream come true. When I was born, my mom and dad invested in some stocks, reinvesting shares, and they just accrued over time. And when I was 27, I cashed it all in. Gone. So if I was coming home from Everest, if I was coming home from Kathmandu, Nepal, I had no car, I had no house, I had nothing to come home to. But I knew I had a dream, and I knew I was going after it. So we'll change the direction a little bit from the sad cancer, but you can tell a little sense of humor in there too, to the adventure. And the adventure begins in Kathmandu. So there is something I need to mention about that video. I'm sure someone in here saw it. That white thing I had behind my ear. Yeah, everyone always thinks it's a cigarette. It's a pen, okay? 2 cancers, 1 lung, 3 packs a day. I mean, come on. It's a big pen. So everywhere I go, I try to share my survivorship story with the patients. And I have this idea and this notion of a circle of hope. And while I'm climbing, I think of all the people who are battling for their lives. And when I come back from the mountains, I come and visit them because I think there's some connection there. Knowing that I've been in their situation, they're giving me hope, I'm giving them hope. It's a nice synergy. The first hospital I ever visited was just outside Kathmandu in a place called Bhaktapur. It's the Bhaktapur Cancer Center. Hey. And while I was there, the doctor, Dr. Baral, told me that because of the lack of funding, lack of education, lack of technology, 90 to 95% of the patients would die. You should have seen how big the patient's eyes got when the doctor told him I was a 2-time cancer survivor, in which I'm pretty sure I was the first survivor they'd ever seen. It literally took all the strength I had to hold back my tears. When I was sick, my dad gave me a green shirt. On the shirt it said, I don't always look like this. I'm on chemo. Got me through 2 cancers, brought me some good luck. I took it with me to this hospital and found a young man who was 14 years old battling Hodgkin's lymphoma. It was like looking into a mirror. I gave him that shirt and told him it was for good luck. And when he got better, he had to give it to someone else for good luck. And I've always wondered what happened to that shirt. 5 years after climbing Everest, we went back to help raise about $200,000 for the hospital. And while I was there, Dr. Baral was still the oncologist. And I remember he was standing up on the hospital stairs. And I was coming across the hospital parking lot. And he literally looked at me and he shouted, "You're that t-shirt guy." And I said, "Yeah, whatever happened to that shirt?" So we sat down in his office and he told me that that young man survived. Not only did he survive, he passed the shirt to someone else. She survived. She passed the shirt to someone else. He survived. Last I heard, the shirt has been passed to over 30 different survivors. Now, what does that tell you about the power of the mind and power of the spirit? Whether you think it's possible or not, you're absolutely right. Whether you think it's possible or not, you're absolutely right. So the doctor told the patients the next day we were going to leave for Nepal, or for Everest Base Camp. And he was right. We flew into a little town called Lukla. Anyone ever seen the Nova special on the world's 10 most dangerous airports? So I see some heads going like, yep. This was number 1. And it's number 1 for a reason. Anybody ever flown into Lukla? Been there? The airstrip is at about an angle like this. Because in the Himalayan mountains, there are no flat sections. At one end is the Himalayan mountains, and at the other end is a cliff. And it makes you feel really good when you look out the window and see old fuselages at the bottom.
All my troubles seem so far away.
So when we landed, we had to go through a bunch of different villages. It took us 2 weeks to go 50 miles. And we hiked from Lukla all the way to Everest Base Camp. And I know we're in a hurry here, so we went from Lukla to Pakting, Pakting to Namche Bazaar, Namche to Tami, Tami to Namche, Namche to Kumjun, Kumjun to Devashe, Devashe, Dingbache, Dingbache to Chukun, Chukun to Lobashe, Lobashe to Gorkashap, and Gorkashap to Base Camp. Moving right along. When we finally got to Everest Base Camp, 17,600 feet. I was going to be living in a tent for a month and a half. A lot of people don't understand what it takes to get up Everest. And it's not like you go to the Rocky Mountains and these smaller peaks, even like Kilimanjaro. I know I spoke to someone who did that. And you don't go from here to here to here to here. You go from here to here, back down, up to here again, back down, up here, back down. So we'll kind of skip this, and we'll skip that one too. Should be video. There we go. We'll start that one. How's that? Perfect. So taking you guys up through Everest Base Camp and going through the Khumbu Icefall, the reason you go up and down and up and down and up and down is so your body can actually manufacture more red blood cells and hemoglobin. Because the higher you go, the less atmospheric pressure there is, less oxygen there is. You know, the percentages are the same, they're just more spread out. So your body starts to adjust. And that's the first reason you take your time going up and up and up and down, up and down, up and down. Second one is every time you go up, you have a full backpack. You drop that off. You go back down with an empty backpack. You grab some more gear and go back up. So every time we came back to base camp, we would rest a day, 2 days, 3 days, 4 days, no more than 5 days. So the first time we went from base camp to the top of the ice fall back to base camp that you saw, rested. Base camp up to camp 1, 1 night, back to base camp. Base camp up to camp 1, 1 night, just below camp 2, back to base camp. Base camp up to camp 2, 2 nights, back to base camp. Base camp up to camp 2, 2 nights, back to base camp. Base camp up to camp 2, 2 nights, just below camp 3, back to base camp. Base camp up to camp 2, 2 nights, up to camp 3, back to base camp. Now we're ready to push for the summit. So by the time you're ready to climb this stupid thing, you've done it 15 times. But the entire time we're climbing, we're carrying everything we need in our backpacks and in our hearts. Moving forward up the mountain, we kind of see the speakers in the way, but you can see where the summit ridge is, and the summit going all the way to the top. And next time you hop in a pressurized tin can with wings, hurtling through space, and the captain comes over the announcement system and says, "We've reached our cruising altitude of 29,000 feet. Look out the window and up 35 more feet. Everest is at an altitude where jumbo jets level off and fly. Avalanches every day. Temperatures can go from 80 to 0 in 5 minutes. It can range from 80 to minus 60. Gives a new meaning to the word layering. So we'll begin on May 11th, where the goal was to go from base camp, spend 2 nights at Camp 2, 1 night at Camp 3, rest at Camp 4, and move up to the summit. And you're about to see my incredible sense in fashion. Those were actually fluorescent yellow because if something happened to my body, it was a nice contrast against the snow so they could find me. In fact, I remember when I was leaving, called up my mom and my dad on the satellite phone and said, "Mom, Dad, I'm heading up." I lost a friend on the mountain. I remember looking up, seeing where he landed, because it was blood red. And I had to continue past that. So going up through the Khumbu Icefall is the most dangerous section of the climb. There are chunks of ice that would easily fit in this room. And a cool story, I was standing on a serac, is what it's called, a chunk of ice. And this whole chunk of ice in this whole section, if you can imagine Manhattan on a 45-degree angle and all those skyscrapers as chunks of ice, that's what the Khumbu Icefall is like, but it's moving at 4 feet a day. So everybody knows what it sounds like when you have a glass and put some ice in there and pour some water in, that snapping and popping. Imagine what it sounds like when you're standing on a chunk of ice, like the size of the stage, popping and grinding. And I was on one of them when it was coming down, and there was a ladder over here. A lady was taking her time, just an aluminum ladder. You can see it up there, one of them. And you know how sometimes you feed off of each other's energy? Sometimes when one person gets happy, the other person gets happy, and you kind of bounce up and down and get all excited. But it works the other way around, too. When you start to get nervous, you feed into that nervousness, too. Somebody else picks up on it. So that lady's taking your time. I have my Sherpa friend over here. He's chanting right now because I'm freaking out. He's chanting. He's going, "Oh, Mare Padme Ho." I'm over here thinking to myself, the hell's he afraid of? He believes in reincarnation. So he's over here going, "Oh, Mare Padme Ho," which means hail to the jewel of the lotus. I'm over here going, "Our Father who art in heaven." She gets down, he gets down, I get down, and by the time we were safe down there, everything we were standing on disappeared. So I was going to ask who's afraid of heights, but I'll just ask who's afraid of aluminum ladders tied together spanning crevasses? So I hope every hand goes up on that one. So eventually we made it up to Camp 4, known as the death zone. And the reason it's called the death zone is because the human body does not survive in this altitude. Muscle melts away, fat melts away, brain cells die. The human body deteriorates in this altitude. I'm roughly 6'2", weighed about 180 pounds, weighed about 180 going over there, was there for a month and a half, came home weighing 150. In a month and a half, to maintain my weight, I needed roughly 12,000 calories a day. I think we were close at dinner last night, but not so. I remember getting here and rating to my brother, telling him we're 3 hours behind everybody else because we slept through our alarm clocks. And I remember looking up at the summit ridge, and it was just like a string of Christmas lights because we're leaving in the middle of the night. And it's just one headlamp right in front of the other, just like a dotted Christmas lights. So I told him we better get going. And when we got to, there's an infamous spot called the Knife Ridge where it literally drops off 3 feet over here, 2 miles down into Tibet, 1.5 miles straight down into Nepal. And as I'm going up, there's a joke I'm about to tell you that I wasn't going to. And I'm prefacing it as saying it's a horrible joke. Because in the climbing industry, we have an interesting sense of humor. When you get to this ridge line, 2 miles over here, 1.5 miles over here, they say if you want to live longer, fall off to the right side. Wait for it. You have an extra 0.5 mile to fall. I told you it was awful. So I'm on this knife ridge, bouncing up and down because I can't feel from my knees down. Kicking my feet to get blood to my toes. I think I'm going to lose my toes and my feet. I still have them all. I remember looking over to my right side. It was like a sea of clouds and mountains as island peaks. And I could see the most incredible sunrise of my entire life. There was nothing in the way. The most incredible purple, blue, yellow, orange, green. Most amazing sunrise of my entire life. And I was thinking, it can't get any better than this. Until I looked off to my left side, and straight out at eye level were stars. Stars at eye level, the most amazing sunrise I've ever seen in my entire life. And I started bawling. I was like, I'm going to make it. Huge mistake. Tears came down, froze on my face. The moisture from my eyeballs came to the front of my glasses. I couldn't see. Swished them out, put my goggles in. But eventually, we can go to the next one too. Yeah, next one. Thank you. But eventually I made it up and became the first cancer survivor in history to climb Mount Everest. Thank you. But I wasn't alone. Every single person who's ever been touched by cancer was up there with me. The entire time I was climbing, I had a flag about this big that had names of people touched by cancer. And on the bottom it said, dedicated to all those affected by cancer in this small world, keep climbing. I had it folded up in my chest pocket as a constant reminder of my goals. And I left that flag, see if you can see it right there, forever commemorating the struggle of cancer patients worldwide. So when I got up there, I looked around and thought to myself, I have to go back down. Climbing is a round-trip sport. Summiting is optional. Returning is mandatory. Now, I know I'm running out of time, but I was once given 14 days to live. What's an extra 3 minutes? Is that okay? So after doing Everest, I wanted to basically cover the globe in hope and give back. And every single mountain, the highest mountain on every continent now has a flag with people's names who have been touched by cancer on it. And after doing the 7 summits, did the Hawaii Ironman, which is the Ironman distance triathlon in Hawaii World Championship. 2.5 mile swim, 112-mile bike ride, you finish with a marathon. Then went and did the South and North Poles. The 7 summits and the 2 poles is called the Explorer's Grand Slam, which I personally think sounds like a Denny's breakfast platter. I didn't name it. You add in I think there are 50 people in history who have ever done that, first cancer survivor. You add in the Hawaii Ironman, there's 1 person who's ever done all that. Yeah, thank you. 2 cancers, 1 cancer, whatever. I'm going to just I just remembered I had something in my bag over here, but I'm going to keep talking because I think it's worth it. A lot of people know what I've done, but a lot of people want to know how I've done it. There's a little insight right there. Take it for what it's worth. One of the things that I always do is I focus on what I want, not the avoidance of what I don't. So perfect example, I'm walking back here, if I'm thinking to myself, I'm in front of a bunch of people, don't trip, don't trip, don't trip, what's going to happen? I'm going to fall on my face. But if I tell myself, stand tall, walk strong, focus on what you want, not the avoidance of what you don't want. Be positive. What's the other thing up there? Be consistent. Consistency is more important than intensity. Begin at the end. Whether you think it's possible or not, you're absolutely right. So I'm going to wrap it up here real quick by saying a couple things. One, I have a DVD I'd love to give to somebody. We can figure out how to do that. But when I went to the North Pole, I had a flag that had thousands of names of people touched by cancer on it. And I'm going to get emotional. This is the flag that I took to the North Pole. You guys can see that. So people always ask me, why do you do what you do? There's thousands of reasons right there. So I'll wrap up just by saying I had my annual checkup recently. All good? Thank you. And I'll just leave this here if anybody else wants to see it. But after that, because the reason I go in once a year for a checkup, no one's ever had Hodgkin's and Askins before. They don't know what's going to happen. So I get a checkup once a year, and I kind of get a new lease on life, another year to live. So I told my friends, my family, that everything came out great. You know, the CBC platelet counts, all that stuff was perfect. They all said, YOLO, man, you only live once. YOLO, that's fantastic. You only live once. I thought about that for a second. I thought to myself, no. That's not it at all. We need to look at it a little bit differently. You only die once. You live every day. Thank you very much.